All right, folks, I'm Cole Powell, musician by day, film nerd by night. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the new Cold War era historical drama, The Brink of War, which, spoiler alert, pretty good. Before we get into it, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, click the bell for notifications, follow wherever you're getting this episode. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon for early access and full-length movie reactions. All right, The Brink of War. This is a Cold War era Ronald Reagan led movie. This is the second Ronald Reagan movie that's come out last couple of years. The other one being Reagan, which was a full-fledged biopic starring Dennis Quaid as Ronald Reagan. And that movie I reviewed whenever it originally came out. There were some good parts, there were some bad parts. Ultimately, it was a mediocre film. I did appreciate Dennis Quaid's portrayal in that as a full-on Reagan impersonation, yet somehow he managed not to make it a parody, and I appreciated that. This is a whole different type of movie. First of all, it's not a full-fledged biopic. This is about a very specific moment during Reagan's administration. This is his meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev in Iceland in 1986. It's kind of a little-known incident that wasn't considered significant at the time, but apparently Gorbachev, as he admitted later, did consider it significant. And the idea is this was really the moment where the Cold War began to end. It's a much better movie than the Reagan film. And one of those reasons is Jeff Daniels, Jared Harris, and J.K. Simmons, who played the three leads in this movie. Jeff Daniels portrays Reagan, Jared Harris is Gorbachev, and J.K. Simmons is the Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State, George Shultz. Jeff Daniels doesn't do a Dennis Quaid in this. He decides that he's not going to try to do an impersonation. I think that's a good call because I feel like if Jeff Daniels tried to just do a straight-up Reagan impersonation, it would delve into that SNL-like parody realm. Instead, he opts for a Reagan flavor, which I think works for him as an actor, but also works for the film because even if he were to nail a Reagan impersonation, I think that would shift the focus away from both men at this moment meeting in this place and make it more about a Reagan-type movie. And I feel like that's what the Dennis Quaid biopic did. They wanted to make that movie a portrait on a pedestal of Reagan as a world historical figure. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But this movie is about showing Reagan and Gorbachev too as fully formed human beings, great men in their time, in their respective nations, trying to figure out the moment that they're in. With Reagan, he's shown to be intelligent, witty, opinionated. He's a Republican, he has an agenda, and you can love him or hate him. But that is the man that he is in that moment and in this movie. It's the same thing with Jared Harris, who is phenomenal as Gorbachev. Jared Harris, I think, one of the most underrated actors working today. He's one of these guys that most people that watch movies regularly know, but they don't necessarily know his name. They don't know that he's the son of the late, great Richard Harris. And they don't really realize what kind of a career he's had and how great an actor he is. He's phenomenal here as Gorbachev. And like with Reagan, they are trying to play Gorbachev impartially. They show him that he's smart, he's tough, serious, he's worried, but he is a communist, and he also has an agenda, and you can take him or leave him. I don't know enough about the historical Gorbachev to be able to say how accurate this portrayal is. I kind of feel like maybe they may be making him a little bit more sympathetic than he was in real life, but I don't know. I just don't know enough about him. But either way, they don't shy away from showing that the communist system that Gorbachev dedicated his life to is not a great thing. J.K. Simmons, another phenomenal actor, one of the greatest character actors of all time. J.K. Simmons, usually in his roles, is kind of just a variation of the same character, the same voice, and it's always great, always works great. On this one, he's actually, I feel like, playing a character. This is the first time I think I've ever thought of a character J.K. Simmons is playing as not J.K. Simmons in that role. He's doing something a little bit different with his voice, with his enunciation. I'm deducing he is he pulled that from the real life Schultz, who I don't know. I've never seen any footage of him that I recall, so I can't speak to that. But regardless, J.K. Simmons is still lovable, as he always is in every movie. The script of this movie, this is first-time writer-director. I say first-time writer. It's first-time director. I'm not sure about the writer part. Michael Russell Gunn. And he completed copious amounts of research on this movie. Originally, the idea for this came from a conversation he had with the real George Schultz before Schultz passed away. And he ended up being able to talk to Schultz, doing interviews with people, gathering material, including the then recently declassified transcripts of the Iceland meeting in 1986. And he uses all that to try to give a level of authenticity. The dialogue is really, really snappy. There's a lot of humor in there and a lot of wit. It reminded me of an Aaron Sorkin script. I don't think it's quite as good as an Aaron Sorkin script. I think if Aaron Sorkin had actually written the script, the dialogue probably would have been even better. But I don't think Aaron Sorkin could have maintained the neutrality and impartiality that Michael Russell Gunn is going for in this movie. And what's funny, also, it's a political movie, but it's fairly apolitical. It doesn't really get into niche issues or ideologies, which also allows it to avoid heavy-handedness and preachiness that you get in a lot of political movies like these. The only two ultimate messages in this movie are, one, liberty is better than slavery, and two, resolving differences diplomatically is better than going to war. And I don't think there's any reasonable person that can really argue with those 2 points. Some of the other good stuff in the movie, they shot this movie in the original quote-unquote haunted house that the meeting took place in 1986, which gives it a whole nother level of authenticity. There's also a few really good shots, particularly whenever they get outside the house and you get to see the Icelandic landscape. There's a side plot involving the wives of both these men, Mrs. Gorbachev, who came on the trip, and then Nancy Reagan, who stayed home because she didn't realize that Gorbachev's wife was coming, and there's like this kind of a Cold War between those two themselves separately, and their husbands are talking to them, and we get to kind of see the dynamic between the husbands and wives. And that makes the men themselves even more human. I thought that was really, really well done. But the movie is not perfect. It is really good. It's got a lot of good things going for it. The biggest issue with this movie is some of the narrative padding. There's a couple of side plots, one of which is the American and Soviet agents sharing a workspace. I get why it's in there. It does offer to show the different perspectives between the two, but it's pointless. It could have been excised and you lost nothing in the movie. Also, there is a side plot, I think they're in like 3 scenes maybe, of a British journalist and an American journalist who are following Mrs. Gorbachev around the island. The scenes with Mrs. Gorbachev, maybe you could have kept them, but just had, if you needed a reporter asking her a question, make the focus on Mrs. Gorbachev and then have a random reporter ask her a question. There's no need to make 2 fully formed characters out of reporters for this movie. They could have been completely done away with. There's some other little cuts here and there that I think would have really tightened the movie up. It really, if you could have cut this movie from 2 hours to 90 minutes and focused it on the 2 to 4 men in the room hashing this out. It was Reagan, Gorbachev, Schultz, and then the guy that was the equivalent of Schultz, it was with Gorbachev. You could have really focused on this and made it kind of a bottle movie where it's mostly in the room, almost like a play. And I think you could have done that effectively without losing the audience. I think the reason that some of these subplots are put in there is because the filmmakers are concerned, well, nobody wants to watch a couple of guys in a room talk for 90 minutes. But I think actually it would have been a better movie if most of the movie was just them talking and you build the tension from their interactions, from their conversation, and then you have a couple of breakout sequences with the men and their wives to give you that little bit of reprieve that you need, break the monotony. One thing that was kind of weird to me, from my understanding, Gorbachev was not fluent in English, and in this movie, Jared Harris is speaking English the entire time, and that's completely understandable, just for narrative flow. Instead of having the character speaking Russian and have an interpreter on screen or have subtitles. So it was a fine narrative choice. What's weird, though, for me is, even though in real life Gorbachev didn't speak fluent English, there are multiple lines in the movie about how good Gorbachev's English is and what command of the English language he has. I don't know why those lines are there. It's ahistorical. I understand why you made that change, but I don't understand why you're now making that a plot point and part of the script and kind of bringing it to the forefront when it's totally ahistorical and you only made that change for narrative flow. So I'm not 100% sure why that was done. Or maybe Gunn knows something that we don't. Maybe Gorbachev actually did speak English fluently, and we had no idea. There's also some weird camera angles in this movie, and I think that has to do with this. I don't think I saw any odd angles outside the house. It was only inside the house, particularly when they're in the conference room. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact they shot this in the original house. So it wasn't on a soundstage. So you didn't have an open fourth wall. You're having to work around literal four walls, and it's very cramped. And that just led to some kind of odd frame shots and some unparalleled shots when you cut from one character to another. There's another scene where they're at a table and you can't really get them at a table very well, so they do a split screen, but there's a window in the background that should be center frame, but the way they have to frame it and split, the split screen goes down one part of the window, so you got just a little bit of part of window on Gorbachev's frame, then you got a big part of window on Reagan's frame, and it just does not look symmetrical. So it's a little off-putting. Another issue was the sound mixing in one scene. The opening scene, the music was so loud I could not hear the dialogue at all, and I initially thought it was my speakers. I got a screener on this. I didn't see this in theaters. I was sent a screener on this. So I thought it was my speakers. I tried 3 different speakers. It was the same issue. That wasn't an issue throughout the rest of the movie until that opening scene replayed near the end of the film. It's the same issue. I could barely hear the dialogue. It was drowned out so much by the music. Not sure what went on there. But these issues are minor, really. And again, the film is very good. I'm a little concerned, though. It seems to be made for huge fans of historical dramas and political dramas like me. Somebody who can sit down and just get all into a conversation about nuclear disarmament between 2 world historical leaders from 40 years ago. Because of that, I'm not sure if this is going to be able to find a mainstream audience. And right now, I looked at the box office. The opening numbers here is 2.7 million thereabouts for the opening weekend, which is not bad for a film like this, except the number I had for the estimated budget on this was 21 million, which if you make 2.7 million opening weekend on $21 million budget in this climate, when you're up against Spider-Man's out right now, Odyssey is still going strong right now, some other movies are out right now. I don't know if it's going to be able to recoup its budget at the box office, but it's an Angel Studios release, and they have a little bit different business models, and they may be able to recoup this on streaming, and I know they have a pay it forward model. So time will tell. Regardless, if you like well-made historical dramas, political dramas, but without heavy-handed preachiness of political ideologies, I highly recommend going to check out The Brink of War this week, because it is a solid film. I'd give it both quality rating and personal enjoyment rating an 8 out of 10. So what do you think? Have you gone to see Brink of War? If not, are you thinking about heading out to theaters and seeing this? You're going to wait for streaming? Does it not interest you at all? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time. Film Nerd by Night, created and hosted by Cole Powell. Theme, Beautiful Now, written and performed by Cole Powell. Edited by Presley Page. A Randomine Records production. Section 107 of U.S. copyright law allows for the fair use of copyrighted material for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, parody, or research.